The Galactic Council chamber had never been so quiet. 12 ancient civilizations sat in stunned silence as Jake Morrison finished delivering his mission report. The humans had not only survived their impossible mission, but had somehow gained knowledge that challenged everything the Council thought they understood about the universe. Elder Zintax of the Cerebrans was the first to speak. Captain Morrison, you claim that the Void Plague was artificial in origin. Can you provide evidence of this assertion? Jake nodded to Helen Carter, who activated the holographic display they had prepared. The image showed the crystalline artifact they had discovered at the plague's core, but now their enhanced perception allowed them to reveal details invisible to normal senses. This structure was created by a species that our data archives identify as the Devourers, Helen explained. Based on the quantum signatures we detected, they built this weapon approximately 50,000 years ago. Ambassador Keth Var leaned forward in his seat. The Devourers have been extinct for millennia. Our historical records show they destroyed themselves in a civil war long before the Council was formed. That's what we thought too, Danny Kim said, joining the presentation. But the artifact's memory core contained their final message to the galaxy. They didn't destroy themselves by accident. The holographic display changed to show ancient symbols that the humans had somehow learned to read during their exposure to the artifact. Lisa Rodriguez provided the translation. When faced with their own extinction, the Devourers decided that if they could not survive, nothing should. They created 7 weapons designed to consume the fundamental forces that hold reality together. The Council members exchanged alarmed glances. Illuminar Vexthara of the Luminals spoke first. 7 weapons? You mean there are 6 more of these devices? According to the data we recovered, yes, Jake confirmed. The Void Plague was just the first. The others are programmed to activate randomly over the course of several thousand years. Ancient Mordain of the Eternal Collective, the eldest being on the Council, stood slowly. This is disturbing news, but I must ask how you humans gained the ability to access this information. Our greatest scholars have studied Devourer artifacts for centuries without learning to read their language. The humans looked at each other uncomfortably. The changes they had experienced inside the artifact were difficult to explain, even to themselves. Our exposure to the weapon's core energy altered us in ways we don't fully understand, Jake said carefully. We can now perceive aspects of space-time that were previously invisible to human senses. Are you saying the mission changed you into something other than human? Asked Sage Kelthar of the Wisdom Keepers. Helen had been studying their biological readings since their return. We're still genetically human, but our neural patterns now include structures that shouldn't be possible with organic brain tissue. It's as if our minds were expanded to accommodate new types of perception. This is highly concerning, Elder Zintax said. Throughout galactic history, species that have been altered by ancient artifacts have often become unstable or dangerous. Dangerous how? Lisa asked. The last species to be significantly altered by Devourer technology became obsessed with power and attempted to conquer their entire sector. We were forced to quarantine their worlds for the safety of other civilizations. Jake felt a chill at the implications. Are you suggesting we should be quarantined as well? The Council will need time to evaluate the situation, Ancient Mordain replied diplomatically. Danny stepped forward with a data pad in his hands. Before you make any decisions about quarantine, there's something else you need to know. The artifact's memory banks contained detailed information about where the other 6 weapons are hidden. The chamber fell silent again. Finally, Ambassador Kethvar spoke. You know the locations of the remaining Devourer weapons. Not just their locations, Helen added. We also learned about their capabilities. Each weapon targets a different fundamental aspect of reality. One consumes gravitational fields, another breaks down electromagnetic forces, a third dissolves the strong nuclear force that holds atomic nuclei together. If any of these weapons activate, Jake continued, the effects would be even more devastating than the Void Plague. Entire galaxies could be destroyed. Illuminar Vexthara looked skeptical. Why should we believe information obtained through such unorthodox methods? For all we know, these alterations have damaged your ability to think rationally. Lisa couldn't help but smile. With respect, rational thinking is what got you stuck with an unsolvable problem in the first place. Sometimes you need to think irrationally to find solutions that rational minds miss. But that's exactly our concern, Elder Zintax said. Your species consistently chooses irrational approaches to problem solving. Now you've been altered by an ancient artifact of unknown origin. How do we know you haven't been programmed to serve some hidden agenda? Jake understood their concerns, but he also knew that time was running out. Because if we were programmed to serve the Devourers, we would have let the Void Plague consume the galaxy instead of stopping it. Perhaps, Ancient Mordain said thoughtfully. Or perhaps stopping one weapon was necessary to gain our trust before guiding us toward the others. The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to immediately quarantine humanity and conduct extensive testing to determine if they posed a threat. Others argued that the humans had earned the right to be trusted after saving trillions of lives. Finally, Sage Kelthar proposed a compromise. What if we allow the humans to lead expeditions to locate and neutralize the remaining weapons, but under close council supervision? Absolutely not, Elder Zintax objected. The risks are too great. What if exposure to more artifacts makes them even more unpredictable? Jake exchanged glances with his crew before speaking. With all due respect to the council, we're not asking for permission. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. No species had ever addressed the council with such directness. Captain Morrison, Ancient Mordain said sternly, the council has governed galactic affairs for 10,000 years. You cannot simply ignore our authority. We're not ignoring your authority, Lisa clarified. We're just pointing out that these weapons threaten the entire universe, not just council space. Humanity has a responsibility to act whether you approve or not. Ambassador Kethvar looked troubled. Captain? Surely you understand that unilateral action by your species would be seen as hostile by other civilizations. Helen pulled up another display showing the projected activation schedule for the remaining weapons. The next weapon is scheduled to activate within 6 months. Even if the council reached a unanimous decision tomorrow, your bureaucratic processes would take years to organize an effective response. Danny nodded in agreement. We don't have years. Every day we debate increases the risk that another weapon will activate and destroy billions of lives. So what do you propose? Asked Illuminar Vexithara. Jake stood and addressed the full council. We propose to do what humans do best. We'll find these weapons, figure out how to stop them, and save as many lives as possible. You can help us or not, but we're going either way. Elder Zintax's voice was cold. And if the council orders you to cease these activities? Then you'll have to stop us, Jake replied simply. The silence that followed was deafening. Never in galactic history had a newly contacted species openly defied the council's authority. Ancient Mordain spoke slowly and carefully. Captain Morrison, do you understand what you're saying? You're threatening to go to war with the combined forces of 12 advanced civilizations. No, sir. We're threatening to save the universe whether you help us or not. There's a difference. Ambassador Kethvar looked genuinely distressed. Jake, please reconsider. Your species is remarkable, but you cannot stand against the entire galaxy. Lisa laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. Ambassador, 3 months ago you told us it was impossible to stop the Void Plague. How did that work out? This is different, Sage Kelthar protested. The Council has resources and military capabilities beyond anything humanity can imagine. Maybe, Jake acknowledged. But you also have bureaucracies and committees and centuries of procedures that have to be followed before anyone can make a decision. The next Devourer weapon won't wait for your committees to reach a consensus. Helen activated one final display showing detailed schematics of the weapon they had destroyed. Look at this data carefully. The Void Plague was the simplest of the 7 weapons. The others are exponentially more dangerous and complex. Every day of delay makes them harder to stop. Danny added his own technical analysis. Based on what we learned from the artifact's memory core, the remaining weapons are designed to activate in sequence. Each successful activation makes the next one more powerful. If we don't stop them soon, they may become literally impossible to defeat. The council members spent several minutes studying the technical data. Finally, Ancient Mordain spoke again. These specifications are disturbing. If accurate, they suggest a level of destructive capability that exceeds our worst fears about Devourer technology. They're accurate, Jake assured him. The question is whether you're going to help us deal with the threat or waste time debating whether we have the right to act. The ship they gave them was called the Defiance, though Jake Morrison suspected the Galactic Council had chosen the name as a subtle commentary on human behavior, rather than as an honor. The vessel had been hastily modified according to Danny Kim's specifications. with every safety system either removed or bypassed to accommodate their impossible mission. Standing in the cargo bay that served as their makeshift command center, Jake looked at his crew and wondered if they were heroes or madmen. Probably both, he decided. Lisa Rodriguez was running final checks on navigation systems that had been pushed far beyond their design limits. Helen Carter was monitoring scanning equipment that would hopefully give them some warning before the void plague tore them apart. Danny Kim was making last-minute adjustments to the quantum drive that would either save the galaxy or create a black hole that consumed their ship. All systems are as ready as they'll ever be, Danny reported. His voice was steady, but Jake could see the nervousness in his eyes. They all knew the odds were against them. Navigation is locked onto the plague's core, Lisa added, though I should point out that conventional navigation becomes meaningless once we enter the affected region. Helen looked up from her instruments. I'm reading massive distortions in space-time starting about 2 light hours from here. Whatever this thing is, it's not natural. Jake activated the communication system to address the small crowd of observers who had gathered to watch their departure. Representatives from all 12 council species were present, though Jake suspected they had come to witness humanity's final act, rather than to wish them luck. This is Captain Morrison aboard the Defiance. We are beginning our approach to the Void Plague. If our mission succeeds, the threat to galactic civilization will be eliminated. If we fail, at least we'll have tried something. Ambassador Kethavar's voice came over the communication channel. The thoughts and hopes of every civilized being in the galaxy go with you, Captain Morrison. Thank you, Ambassador. Defiance out. Jake turned to his crew. Well, team, time to go do something impossible. The first few hours of their journey seemed almost normal. The Defiance moved through regular space at maximum speed, covering the distance between Haven Prime and the plague's outer boundary faster than any ship in galactic history. Their modified quantum drive pushed them through space in ways that probably violated several laws of physics. Approaching the outer edge of the affected region, Lisa reported, I'm starting to see some strange readings on the navigation sensors. Define strange, Jake said. Well, according to my instruments, we're somehow moving in 3 different directions at once, and the distance to our destination keeps changing even though we haven't altered course. Helen's scanning equipment was showing even more disturbing readings. Space-time distortion is increasing rapidly. The plague seems to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Danny was monitoring the quantum drive with growing concern. The engine is starting to resonate with whatever energy field the plague generates. If this gets much worse, we might lose control completely. That's when they crossed the boundary into truly affected space, and reality stopped making sense. The stars outside their viewports began to flicker like candles in the wind. Some disappeared entirely, while others appeared to be moving in impossible patterns. The ship's internal gravity started fluctuating, causing loose objects to float randomly through the air. Navigation is completely unreliable now, Lisa announced. My instruments can't agree on where we are or which direction we're facing. Time distortion is severe, Helen added. My chronometer shows we've been in the plague region for 6 hours. But my biological readings suggest only 20 minutes have passed. Jake felt the deck shift beneath his feet as the ship's artificial gravity failed completely. Danny, how's our engine holding up? Not well. The quantum field interactions are causing massive instabilities. I'm having to adjust the containment parameters every few seconds just to keep us from creating an accidental singularity. The deeper they traveled into the plague, the worse conditions became. The ship's lights began strobing randomly, making it difficult to see their instruments. The air recycling system started producing atmosphere with varying oxygen levels, forcing them to work while sometimes gasping for breath and sometimes feeling lightheaded from too much oxygen. This is incredible, Helen said, somehow managing to sound excited despite their dire circumstances. The plague isn't just consuming matter and energy. It's breaking down the fundamental structure of space-time itself. Can you determine what's causing it? Jake asked while gripping his chair as the ship suddenly rotated 90 degrees without changing direction. I'm getting readings that suggest artificial origin. This level of systematic breakdown requires incredible technology and power. Lisa had given up using her instruments and was navigating by instinct and guesswork. I think we're getting close to the core. The distortions are becoming more organized, like there's a pattern to the chaos. Danny was now manually controlling every aspect of the quantum drive, his hands dancing across controls faster than should have been humanly possible. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it soon. I can't maintain these field configurations much longer. That's when they saw it. At the center of the void plague, where dozens of star systems had once existed, something impossible floated in the darkness. It looked like a massive sphere made of crystallized space-time, pulsing with energies that hurt to look at directly. That's not natural, Helen breathed. Someone built that thing. Jake stared at the artifact through the viewport. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time, like a jewel made of compressed starlight and shadow. Can you scan it? I'm trying, but my equipment keeps giving contradictory readings. Whatever it is, it exists in at least 7 dimensions simultaneously. Captain, Danny called urgently. The quantum drive is starting to resonate with that thing. If I don't shut it down soon, we're going to lose containment. Jake made the decision that would define humanity's relationship with the galaxy forever. Don't shut it down. Push it harder. What? Danny stared at him in shock. You heard me. Instead of fighting the resonance, use it. Let our drive sync up with whatever that artifact is doing. Lisa understood immediately. You want to feed our quantum field into the plague's power source? Exactly. If this thing is breaking down space-time by consuming energy, let's give it more energy than it can handle. Helen looked at the readings from the artifact. Jake, if we're wrong about this, we could make the plague stronger instead of stopping it. And if we don't try, 3 trillion people die anyway. Danny hesitated for only a moment before his hands began working the controls with desperate precision, removing all safety limiters from the quantum drive. This is going to get very dangerous very quickly. The Defiant shuddered as Danny began feeding power directly into the resonance field connecting them to the artifact. The ship's lights went out completely, leaving them in darkness broken only by the eerie glow from their instruments. Drive containment is failing, Danny reported. At this rate, we'll have a full singularity forming inside the engine compartment within minutes. Navigation is impossible now, Lisa added. I can't tell if we're moving toward the artifact or away from it. Jake could feel the ship coming apart around them. Metal groaned under stresses that shouldn't exist, and the air itself seemed to thicken and thin randomly. Helen, what's happening to the artifact? It's changing. The energy patterns are becoming unstable. I think our quantum field is interfering with whatever process it uses to consume spacetime. Good or bad, I don't know. The readings are completely outside any theoretical framework I've ever studied. The artifact began to pulse faster, and the space around it started to warp visibly. Stars that had been consumed began to reappear briefly before vanishing again, as if reality couldn't decide what was supposed to exist. Drive containment failure in 30 seconds, Danny announced. After that, we'll have an uncontrolled black hole eating the ship from the inside out. Jake looked at his crew, these brave humans who had volunteered to attempt the impossible. Any regrets? Just one, Lisa said with a grin that somehow managed to be cheerful despite their circumstances. I wish we could see if this crazy plan actually works. Drive containment failure in 10 seconds, Danny counted down. 5, 4, 3, 2. The Defiance exploded. But instead of the destructive blast they expected, something else happened. The ship's quantum drive, operating far beyond any safe parameters, created a singularity that immediately began interacting with the artifact's energy matrix in ways that violated everything known about physics. Jake felt consciousness slip away as space-time itself seemed to fold around them. In his last moment of awareness, he saw the artifact pulse once more with blinding intensity, and then everything went white. When he woke up, he was floating in what appeared to be empty space, surrounded by his crew. They were all somehow alive and breathing despite having no spacesuits or life support. Is everyone okay? Jake called out, his voice carrying impossibly through the vacuum. Define okay, Lisa replied, looking around at the impossible environment they found themselves in. We're alive in hard vacuum, so I'm calling that a win regardless of how little sense it makes. 3 months had passed since the Endeavour arrived at Haven Prime, the neutral world where humanity had established their first embassy beyond Earth. Jake Morrison had grown used to the strange double sunrise that painted the sky in shades of purple and gold each morning, but he still felt like an outsider. Among the ancient civilizations of the Galactic Council, the embassy itself was a modest building compared to the towering structures that housed representatives from species thousands of years older than humanity. Helen Carter had set up her research laboratory in the basement, while Danny Kim worked with alien engineers to understand technologies that seemed like magic to human eyes. Lisa Rodriguez spent most of her time in the navigation center, studying star charts that showed trade routes and territories spanning hundreds of light years. The scope of galactic civilization still amazed her, but she had noticed something troubling in recent weeks. "Jake, you need to see this," Lisa called from her workstation. She had been monitoring communication channels between Council worlds, and the reports coming in were unlike anything in their historical records. Jake joined her at the display, where a three-dimensional map showed the outer edge of the galaxy. A dark region was spreading across several sectors, and as they watched, another star system simply vanished from the display. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "The Zephyrians call it the Void Plague. It started 3 weeks ago near the Andromeda border, and it's spreading fast. Every star system it touches just disappears completely." Helen had heard their conversation and came upstairs to join them. "Disappears how? Are the stars being destroyed?" Lisa shook her head. "That's just it. They're not being destroyed. According to the sensor readings, it's like they never existed at all. The plague consumes matter, energy, space, even time itself." Danny looked up from the alien computer he had been studying. "How is that possible?" "Nobody knows. The Council's best scientists have been working on it for weeks without finding any answers. The Cerebrans tried analyzing it with pure logic. The Luminals attempted to fight it with energy manipulation. The Chronarchs even experimented with time distortion techniques. Nothing works. The situation became clearer when Ambassador Kethvar visited the embassy later that day. The normally composed Zephyrian looked tired and worried as he explained what the Council had learned. "The Void Plague moves faster than our fastest ships. We cannot evacuate the threatened systems in time. It adapts to every weapon we try to use against it. Worse, it seems to grow stronger each time it consumes a star system." Jake studied the projection that Kethvar had brought with him. The dark region was already larger than human space and showed no signs of slowing down. "How many people are we talking about?" Jake asked. "The current projection suggests that 47 star systems containing over 3 trillion beings will be consumed within the next 6 months. If we cannot find a solution, the plague may eventually consume the entire galaxy." Helen felt sick thinking about so many lives being lost. "There has to be something we can do. The Council has prepared evacuation ships for the most critical populations, but we cannot save everyone. Most of our civilizations have accepted that some losses are unavoidable in a crisis of this magnitude." Lisa looked puzzled. "Accepted losses? You're giving up?" "Not giving up," Kethvar corrected gently. "Being realistic. Sometimes even the most advanced civilizations must acknowledge that certain problems cannot be solved." The humans exchanged glances. The idea of simply accepting such massive loss of life without exhausting every possible solution seemed wrong to all of them. After Kethvar left, the embassy team spent hours reviewing all the data they had been given about the Void Plague. The more they learned, the more impossible the situation appeared. "Every conventional approach has been tried and failed," Helen said. "The plague exists in a state that defies our understanding of physics." Danny had been quiet for most of the discussion, but finally spoke up. "What if conventional approaches are the problem?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. "Well, look at this logically. Every Council species is ancient and highly advanced. They've spent thousands of years developing safe, proven methods for solving problems. But this isn't a normal problem." Lisa began to see what Danny was getting at. "You're saying they're trying to solve an impossible problem with conventional solutions?" "Exactly. What if the solution is supposed to be impossible by normal standards?" Jake felt a familiar excitement building. It was the same feeling he had experienced as a test pilot, when faced with aircraft that shouldn't be able to fly. "What did you have in mind?" Danny pulled up the technical specifications of their quantum drive. "The plague consumes energy and matter, right? What if we fed it something it couldn't digest?" "Like what?" Helen asked. "A controlled singularity. If we modified the quantum drive to create a small black hole instead of a stable wormhole, we might be able to disrupt whatever process the plague uses to consume space-time." The room fell silent as they considered the implications. Creating a black hole inside a spaceship was theoretically possible with their technology, but it would almost certainly destroy the ship and everyone aboard. "Danny, that's completely insane," Lisa said finally. "I know, but insane might be exactly what we need." Jake was already thinking through the logistics. "We'd need to get close enough to the plague's core to deploy the singularity effectively. That means flying straight into something that has consumed entire star systems. The ship would have to be modified extensively. Danny continued. We'd need to remove all safety systems and run the quantum drive far beyond its design limits. The radiation alone would be lethal within minutes. Helen shook her head. No computer could handle the calculations needed to maintain a controlled singularity under those conditions. The environmental chaos would make it impossible. Then we'd have to do it manually, Jake said quietly. They all stared at him. Flying a ship manually into the heart of a space-time consuming plague while creating artificial black holes was beyond dangerous. It was suicide with extra steps. Jake, even if this crazy plan worked, whoever flew that mission wouldn't be coming back, Lisa pointed out. Maybe. But if we don't try, 3 trillion people definitely won't be coming back. The debate continued late into the night. By morning, they had developed a rough outline of how the mission might work, though calling it a plan would be generous. It was more like a controlled disaster with a tiny chance of success. When they presented the idea to Ambassador Kethvar, his reaction was exactly what they expected. This is the most reckless proposal I have ever heard, the Zephyrian said after reviewing their calculations. The probability of success is less than 3%. The probability of the crew surviving is essentially 0. But it might work? Jake pressed. Theoretically, yes. But no rational being would attempt something so dangerous. The risks far outweigh any potential benefits. What if we're not rational? Lisa asked with a slight smile. Kethvar stared at her for a long moment. You're serious about this, aren't you? Dead serious, Jake replied. We'd like permission to present this plan to the full council. The council session that followed would be remembered as one of the most unusual in galactic history. Representatives from 12 ancient civilizations listened in growing amazement as Lieutenant Commander Ben Parker, a young human physicist who had joined their embassy team, explained the technical details of their proposal. The reaction was immediate and universal. Every council member declared the plan impossible, insane, or both. Your species would sacrifice an entire ship and crew based on a 3% chance of success? Asked Elder Zintax of the Cerebrans. 3% is better than 0%, Ben replied simply. But the risk, protested Illuminar Vexthera of the Luminals. No civilization should ask its members to undertake such a mission. Jake stood up to address the council. With respect, we're not asking anyone to undertake this mission. We're volunteering. Volunteering? The word seemed to confuse several council members. Captain Morrison and I have already discussed this, Lisa said. If the council approves the plan, we'll crew the mission ourselves. Helen nodded. All of us. We understand the risks and we accept them. The council chamber erupted in discussions as representatives tried to understand why an intelligent species would volunteer for what amounted to an elaborate form of suicide. Finally, the council's eldest member, Ancient Mordain of the Eternal Collective, spoke. In 10,000 years of galactic civilization, no species has ever proposed a solution that violated so many principles of rational behavior. Yet I must ask, do you truly believe this approach might succeed where our greatest minds have failed? Jake met the ancient being's gaze steadily. Sometimes the best solutions come from those crazy enough to try what rational minds reject as impossible. And if you fail? Then we fail attempting something instead of succeeding at nothing. The vote was close, but eventually the council agreed to allow humanity to attempt their impossible mission. They would provide a ship and whatever resources the humans needed, though they made it clear that no other species would participate in what they considered elaborate suicide. As the session ended, Jake felt both excitement and terror about what they had committed to do. 6 months later, the name of humanity had become legend across the galaxy. Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the new human embassy, watching ships from dozens of species dock at Haven Prime's expanded spaceport. They came seeking solutions to problems that their own civilizations had declared impossible to solve. The transformation had begun immediately after their confrontation with the Council. Word spread quickly that the strange new species from Sol had not only destroyed the Void, plague, but possessed knowledge of ancient devourer, technology that could threaten all life in the universe. Lisa Rodriguez entered the observation lounge carrying a datapad filled with the day's requests. We've got 17 new impossible problems to solve today. The Stellar Merchants Guild wants us to find a trade route through the Maelstrom Nebula. The Peaceful Coalition needs help stabilizing a dying star that their meditation masters depend on. and the synthetic collective is asking if we can fix their central processing core that's been malfunctioning for 3 centuries. Jake shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, these same civilizations thought we were dangerous primitives. Now they're asking us to solve their unsolvable problems. That's because we keep solving them, Helen Carter said, joining the conversation. She had just returned from the Andromeda sector, where she had successfully helped the crystal beings restore their damaged homeworld using techniques that violated several laws of thermodynamics. Danny Kim looked up from the engineering report he was reviewing. The interesting thing is that most of these problems aren't actually impossible. They just require approaches that established civilizations won't consider. Like what? Jake asked. Well, take the Stellar Merchants Guild's request. The Maelstrom Nebula has been considered impassable for thousands of years because it contains gravitational anomalies that destroy any ship that enters. But I've been studying the pattern of those anomalies, and I think they're actually predictable if you account for quantum fluctuations in spacetime. Lisa raised an eyebrow. You want to navigate through a nebula that kills everyone who enters by using quantum physics? Not just quantum physics, Danny replied enthusiastically. Quantum physics combined with chaos theory and a little bit of intuitive guesswork. Jake couldn't help but laugh. In other words, another impossible solution that somehow makes sense to humans. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Kethvar, who had become humanity's strongest supporter on the council. The Zephyrian looked tired but pleased as he joined them in the observation lounge. Captain Morrison, I bring news from the council session. Your solution to the gravitational cascade problem in the Outer Rim has been officially recognized as the most innovative approach to stellar engineering in recorded history. Helen smiled. All we did was convince a black hole to spin in the opposite direction. The physics were actually quite straightforward once you stopped thinking of black holes as permanent fixtures. Quite straightforward, Kethavar repeated with something that might have been amusement in his musical voice. You convinced a gravitational singularity to reverse its rotation using nothing but precisely timed electromagnetic pulses and what you called educated guesswork. It worked, didn't it? Lisa pointed out. That's what terrifies the council, Kethvar replied honestly. Your methods succeed where our greatest minds fail, but none of us understand how or why. Jake had been thinking about this question for months. I think I know why we succeed where others fail. The group turned to look at him expectantly. Every other species in the galaxy evolved past their risk-taking phase as they developed advanced civilization. They learned that survival meant caution, planning, and avoiding unnecessary dangers. But humanity developed differently. We became intelligent specifically so we could take bigger and better risks. Danny nodded slowly. That's why our solutions seem insane to other species. We're not trying to avoid risk. We're trying to manage it. Exactly. When the council looks at an impossible problem, they see all the reasons why it can't be solved. When humans look at the same problem, we see an interesting challenge that probably has a solution nobody's thought of yet. Ambassador Kethvar was quiet for a moment. This analysis explains much about your species' behavior, but it also raises concerns about your long-term impact on galactic civilization. What kind of concerns? Helen asked. The council has governed through consensus and careful deliberation for 10,000 years. Your species arrives and begins solving problems through methods that ignore traditional processes and established wisdom. Some council members worry that humanity's influence could destabilize the entire social order. Jake understood the concern, but he also knew that the old order wasn't working as well as the council liked to believe. Ambassador, how many unsolvable problems were accumulating in galactic civilization before we arrived? Kethvar considered the question, more than we cared to admit. The Void Plague was just the most dramatic example. There were dozens of lesser crises that we had simply learned to live with because no traditional solutions existed. And now species across the galaxy are submitting requests for human assistance, with problems they had previously accepted as permanent fixtures of life. Lisa pulled up a display showing their recent missions. In the past 6 months, we've helped the quantum engineers fix their reality stabilization network, taught the energy dancers how to repair damaged dimensions, and showed the time shepherds how to heal temporal fractures that had been leaking causality for centuries. Each time using methods that our species considered impossible or too dangerous to attempt, Kethvar added. Danny looked at the data with interest. I've been tracking our success rate. We've attempted solutions to 47 impossible problems. 43 of them worked completely. 3 were partial successes. Only 1 was a complete failure. Those are remarkable statistics, Kethvar admitted. But they also support the Council's concerns about humanity's disruptive influence on established order. Jake had been expecting this conversation for months. Ambassador, is the Council planning to take action to limit human activities? There have been discussions. Some members believe humanity should be restricted to solving problems within human space. Others want to establish oversight committees to review your methods before implementation. And what do you think? Helen asked. Kethvar was quiet for a long time before answering. I think the galaxy needs humans to keep doing impossible things, even if it makes the rest of us uncomfortable. Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication from the council chambers. Ancient Mordain himself appeared on the display, his expression grave. Captain Morrison, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. Long-range sensors have detected the activation of the second Devourer weapon. Jake felt his blood run cold. They had been searching for the remaining weapons for months without success, and now one had activated on its own. Where? Jake asked. The Titan sector, approximately 800 light-years from your current position. Early reports suggest this weapon is consuming gravitational fields rather than matter and energy. Lisa was already plotting courses on her navigation computer. We can be there in 18 hours if we push the quantum drive to maximum output. Captain, Ancient Mordain continued, the Council has voted to provide you with full resources and authority to deal with this threat. We are also assigning a support fleet of 12 ships from various Council species. Jake shook his head. With respect, Ancient Mordain, a support fleet will just slow us down. This kind of mission requires speed and flexibility, not overwhelming force. Are you certain? This weapon appears to be even more dangerous than the Void Plague, which is exactly why we need to handle it the way we handled the first one. Fast, direct, and probably completely crazy by normal standards. Danny was already reviewing the technical specifications they had recovered from the first Devourer artifact. If this weapon consumes gravitational fields, then conventional ships won't be able to approach it. Gravity drive systems will fail, and the affected region will become impossible to navigate. So how do we get close enough to stop it? Helen asked. We don't use gravity for propulsion, Jake said simply. We modify the Defiance to run on pure electromagnetic drive and navigate by dead reckoning. Ambassador Kethvar looked concerned. Captain, electromagnetic propulsion in deep space is incredibly inefficient. You would have limited range and no ability to make course corrections. Then we better get the approach right on the first try, Lisa replied with the kind of casual confidence that had become humanity's trademark. Ancient Mordain spoke from the communication display. Captain Morrison, the affected region already spans 3 star systems. If this weapon continues expanding, it could eventually destabilize the gravitational structure of the entire galaxy. Jake looked at his crew. These fellow humans who had become the galaxy's specialists in impossible solutions. How long before the weapon reaches critical mass? Our projections suggest less than 72 hours before the damage becomes irreversible. Then we better get moving. Danny, start modifying the electromagnetic drive systems. Lisa, plot the most direct course to the Titan sector. Helen, review everything we know about gravitational manipulation. The stars had never looked so close before. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Starship Endeavour and watched the swirling colors of hyperspace fade away as they dropped back into normal space. Behind them lay Earth and everything humanity had ever known. Ahead waited the unknown. Lisa Rodriguez checked her instruments and nodded. We made it, Captain. This is the Proxima Centauri system. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that Jake understood completely. They were the first humans to travel beyond their home solar system. Danny Kim looked up from his engineering station with a wide grin. The quantum drive worked perfectly. We covered 4 light-years in just 6 hours. The young engineer had spent 3 years helping to build the revolutionary engine that made this journey possible. Helen, Carter was already scanning the system with her scientific equipment. As the mission's xenobiologist, she hoped to find signs of alien life. What she found was much more than anyone expected. Captain, Helen said quietly, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the 3rd planet. These aren't natural formations. Someone built these structures. Jake felt his heart race. First contact with alien life was always a possibility, but finding an active civilization on their very first interstellar voyage seemed too good to be true. Are you certain? Completely certain. I'm also picking up what looks like spacecraft in orbit around the planet. Captain, I think they know we're here. As if responding to her words, the communication system suddenly came alive with sounds unlike anything they had ever heard. The alien voices spoke in musical tones that rose and fell like a strange song. Danny quickly ran the sounds through their translation computers. The machines had been programmed with every human language and mathematical principle, hoping to find common ground with any alien intelligence they might encounter. After several minutes, the computer produced a rough translation. Greetings, travelers from the third world of Sol. We are the Zephyrians of Proxima III. We welcome you to our star system. We have watched your kind for many cycles and wondered when you would develop the ability to reach us. The bridge fell silent. They had not only found alien life, but aliens who already knew about humanity and had been watching Earth. Jake cleared his throat and activated the communication system. This is Captain Jake Morrison of the human starship Endeavor. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship among the stars. The response came quickly, now in perfectly clear English. We know of your peaceful nature, Captain Morrison. We invite you to visit our world and meet with our representatives. We believe this meeting will be beneficial for both our species. Lisa looked at Jake with concern. Captain, how do they speak English so well? And how long have they been watching us? I suppose we're about to find out, Jake replied. The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. The Zephyrians guided the Endeavor to a safe orbit around their world, which they called Zephyr Prime. From space, the planet looked like a jewel covered in silver cities that sparkled in the light of their red sun. Jake selected a small team to visit the surface while the rest of the crew remained with the ship. Along with Lisa, Danny, and Helen, he chose 4 security officers and a communication specialist. The Zephyrian shuttle that came to collect them was a beautiful craft that seemed to be made of living crystal. It moved through space without any visible engines or exhaust, gliding silently toward the planet's surface. Their pilot was humanity's first sight of an alien being. The Zephyrian stood about 7 feet tall with smooth, scaled skin that changed color from green to blue as they moved. Their large eyes held an ancient wisdom, and their movements were graceful and deliberate. I am Ambassador Kethvar, the alien said in a voice like wind chimes. I have been selected to serve as the primary contact between our species. I hope this marks the beginning of a long and peaceful relationship. The landing pad where they touched down was surrounded by other Zephyrians, all watching the humans with curious eyes. Jake noticed that while they appeared interested, there was something cautious about their behavior, as if they were studying potential threats rather than greeting friends. Ambassador, Kethvar led them through a city unlike anything on Earth. The buildings seemed to grow from the ground rather than being constructed, and soft light came from the walls themselves without any visible source. Gardens filled with alien plants were everywhere, creating a sense of harmony between technology and nature. Your world is beautiful, Helen said, taking careful notes on everything she saw. We have spent many thousands of years learning to live in balance with our environment, Kethvar replied. This is the way of all civilized species in our region of the galaxy. They were taken to a great hall where several other Zephyrians waited. Kethvar explained that these were representatives of something called the Galactic Council, a group that governed relations between intelligent species across this part of the galaxy. How many species belong to this council? Jake asked. 12 ancient civilizations, each with histories spanning tens of thousands of years. We maintain peace and order across thousands of star systems. Lisa exchanged glances with Danny. Humanity was clearly dealing with something far larger and more complex than they had imagined. The meeting that followed would change everything. The Zephyrians explained that they had been monitoring Earth's radio signals for decades, watching humanity's technological development with growing interest and concern. Your species develops remarkably quickly, one of the council representatives said. Most civilizations require millions of years to progress from simple tools to interstellar travel. Humanity accomplished this in mere thousands of years. Is that unusual? Helen asked. The Zephyrians exchanged what appeared to be worried looks. Very unusual. In our experience, rapid development often leads to dangerous instability. Species that advance too quickly tend to destroy themselves or become threats to others. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying humanity is considered dangerous? Not dangerous exactly, Kethvar said carefully, but certainly unpredictable. Your kind shows a willingness to take risks that other species abandoned long ago as their civilizations matured. Danny couldn't help but ask, "What kind of risks?" "All kinds," another council member replied. "You explore dangerous regions of your planet. You experiment with powerful technologies before fully understanding them. You send members of your species into space knowing they might never return. Most troubling of all, you seem to seek out challenges rather than avoid them." The humans looked at each other in confusion. These things seemed perfectly normal to them. "I understand this may be difficult to accept," Kethvar continued, "but from our perspective, humanity displays the behavioral patterns of a species that has not yet learned proper caution. This makes other civilizations nervous about what you might do as you gain access to more advanced technologies." Helen leaned forward. "But surely taking calculated risks is how any species advances and learns." "Calculated risks, yes, but human risks rarely seem calculated by galactic standards. Your space program, for example, began by strapping people to controlled explosions and hoping for the best." Lisa laughed, despite the serious tone of the conversation. "Well, it worked, didn't it?" The silence that followed her comment was telling. The Zephyrians stared at her as if she had just proven their point perfectly. "Yes," Kethvar said slowly, "it worked. That is precisely what concerns us." The meeting continued for several more hours, with the humans learning about galactic civilization and the Zephyrians learning about humanity. By the end, it was clear that both sides had much to think about. As they prepared to return to the Endeavor, Kethvar pulled Jake aside. "Captain Morrison, I must warn you that not all council members are as welcoming as we Zephyrians. Some view humanity as a potential threat that should be contained rather than embraced." "What does that mean for us?" Jake asked. "It means that humanity's actions in the coming months will determine whether you are welcomed into galactic civilization or whether steps are taken to limit your expansion among the stars." Jake nodded grimly. Humanity's first contact with alien life had gone well, but it was clear that their real test was just beginning.